We're told to seek the light, to strive for goodness, clarity, peace. But what if your greatest potential isn't in the light at all? What if it's buried in the dark corners of your own psyche? The places you were taught to avoid, the feelings you were told to suppress, the thoughts you deny, the instincts you reject, the parts of yourself you've labeled wrong. Carl Jung didn't just believe that we have a shadow. He believed the shadow is where our true gold lies, hidden. In his words, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This video isn't about self-improvement in the way most people think of it. It's not about fixing yourself, being more positive, or avoiding discomfort. It's about truth, raw, complex, emotional truth. It's about understanding that your shadow, the part of you that holds your fear, your shame, your rage, your longing, isn't your enemy. It's your compass. It's pointing toward the very things that will make your life meaningful if you're willing to look. So many people walk through life feeling lost, stuck, like something is missing. And yet the answers are often hiding, in plain sight, within the very emotions and patterns they try hardest to escape. This video will take you deep into the heart of Carl Jung's ideas about the shadow and its powerful connection to your purpose. It's not easy work, but if you're watching this, you probably already know that truth doesn't come wrapped in comfort. It comes through courage, through confrontation, and ultimately through integration. Because when you stop running from your darkness, something profound happens. Your life begins to make sense, not in a way that feels perfect, but in a way that feels real, grounded, honest, aligned. This is the story of how your dark side, once feared and rejected, might just be the guide that leads you to your most authentic self. Most people misunderstand the shadow. They think it's the part of them that is bad, their anger, their jealousy, their insecurities. But Carl Jung didn't define the shadow as something evil. He saw it as the hidden part of the psyche, not evil but exiled. It's everything you've disowned in yourself because someone, somewhere, taught you that those parts were unacceptable. And so they were pushed down into the unconscious. But here's the paradox. The shadow doesn't just hold your darkness. It also holds your power, your passion, your buried potential, the things that make you unique, the things that make you. Imagine a child wild and full of life told repeatedly to be quiet, be nice, and don't be so dramatic. That child learns to hide their intensity, their emotions, their voice. They grow up wearing masks, compliant, polite, agreeable. But inside, something essential has gone missing. That missing piece is the shadow. And though it's buried, it doesn't disappear. It leaks out in dreams, in irritability, in irrational fear, in attraction to the very people who mirror what you deny in yourself. It waits, not to sabotage you, but to be reclaimed. Jung believed that the shadow must be faced if we are ever to become whole. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The unclaimed shadow becomes a destiny we never chose. Repeated patterns, toxic relationships, unexplained despair. But when we bring the shadow to light, we don't just understand ourselves better. We begin to take back the pieces of our soul we lost along the way. This isn't just self-awareness, it's self-retrieval. To look at your shadow is to confront what you've been avoiding for years. It's to sit with discomfort, shame, confusion, and not run. But beyond that initial pain is a kind of clarity that's impossible to fake, a felt sense of wholeness. When you see your shadow not as a flaw to fix but a source of forgotten wisdom, something inside shifts. You no longer need to be perfect. You need to be real. The shadow holds the key to that reality. And when you unlock it, you begin to live a life that actually belongs to you. Repression is what happens when the psyche decides something is too dangerous to feel. Not because it actually is, but because it once was. As children, we're incredibly vulnerable, dependent on the acceptance and love of those around us. If crying brought punishment, or if anger made someone withdraw affection, the psyche quickly learns, don't go there. Over time, those emotional reactions don't just get silenced, they get buried. We forget we were ever sad. or ever furious. We become polite, rational, even tempered. But underneath, we are disconnected. From ourselves, Carl Jung observed that what we repress doesn't disappear. It goes underground. It's stored in the unconscious like pressurized steam. You may not remember the pain, but your body does. It shows up in anxiety, in inexplicable fatigue, in a sense of numbness or chronic dissatisfaction. You may live a perfectly functional life and with a job, a partner, a daily routine, yet feel like something essential is missing. That's because repression doesn't only push away pain, it pushes away vitality. You can't selectively numb emotion. If you block grief, you also block joy. This disconnection creates a dangerous illusion that you are someone you're not. You begin to confuse your mask with your identity. You say you're fine when you're actually suffocating. You call yourself calm when what you've become is emotionally distant. Jung's work invites us to ask, what parts of myself have I locked away in the name of being acceptable? And more importantly, what would happen if I let them speak again? Healing begins not when we fix ourselves, but when we feel what was never allowed. Reconnection is painful because it means re-feeling the very things we've avoided. But it's also liberating. To reclaim your anger is to reclaim your boundaries. To honor your sadness is to honor your depth. You start to realize that repression wasn't protection, it was exile. And the parts of you that have been waiting in the dark aren't monsters. They are messengers. They come not to destroy your life, but to finally give it back to you. Wholeness isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. And you cannot be real until you are whole. Projection is one of the most deceptive tricks of the psyche, and one of the most powerful. Carl Jung described it as the unconscious transfer of your own disowned qualities onto another person. What this means, in essence, is that what you cannot or will not accept in yourself, you will see, often with great intensity, in the people around you. This is not a conscious choice, it's automatic, reflexive. You don't know you're projecting. You just feel a strong emotional charge. You feel offended, disgusted, obsessed, or even inexplicably drawn to someone. But the truth is, you're not really reacting to them. You're reacting to a part of yourself. Projection happens in both directions, not just with the traits we dislike, but also with the traits we secretly admire or long for. When we say things like, he's so arrogant, or she thinks she's better than everyone, we might actually be confronting our own repressed ambition, confidence, or self-worth. On the other hand, when we put someone on a pedestal, the perfect partner, the inspiring leader, the soulmate, we may be projecting our own latent gifts that we have yet to own. In both cases, projection is a mirror. But it's a foggy one. You think you're seeing them. You're really seeing you, distorted, enlarged, hidden in plain sight. This mechanism is why certain people trigger us far more than others. It's why we can't stand someone who reminds us of a part of ourselves we've never made peace with. Maybe we were told that being assertive was rude, so now we judge assertive people as aggressive. Or maybe we suppressed our creativity, so now we feel envious or small around those who live freely. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." This is not just poetic, it's diagnostic. Every emotional overreaction is an arrow pointing inward. Doing shadow work through projection requires immense humility. It's not about blaming yourself or excusing others, it's about reclaiming responsibility. The person in front of you may or may not be who you think they are, but they are showing you something essential. Every encounter becomes an invitation. Ask yourself, why does this bother me so much? What am I seeing in them that I cannot see in me? Slowly, the projections begin to retract and your vision clears. You start to meet people as they are, not as reflections of your wounds. And more importantly, you start to meet yourself, without the disguise. Carl Jung often emphasized that the shadow is not simply a vault of shame and darkness, it is also the repository of raw vitality, instinct, and truth. In fact, your shadow contains the very material necessary to uncover your deeper purpose. Most people search for meaning by looking outside. to careers, relationships, goals, or ideologies. But in Jungian psychology, the journey inward, especially into the shadow, reveals who you truly are. The shadow is not an obstacle to purpose, it is the path to it. It holds the parts of you that are buried, rejected, misunderstood, but also powerful, creative, and uniquely yours. Purpose doesn't come from perfection, it comes from integration. The raw, painful truths inside you, your anger, envy, grief, passion, fear, are not meant to be eliminated. They are meant to be transformed. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." What you suppress doesn't disappear, it festers. But what you bring into awareness becomes usable energy. Your shadow contains your unlived life. It shows you what you were afraid to be, afraid to want, afraid to claim. And in that confrontation, you begin to discover who you really are. When you ignore your shadow, your life becomes fragmented. You live by someone else's script, society's rules, your parents' expectations, the ego's fear of rejection. But when you confront your shadow, you begin to uncover what is authentic. You realize that some of your deepest wounds are the gateway to your calling. The person who once felt small and voiceless becomes a healer. The one who was punished for being too much becomes a leader. The artist who was told to be practical finds the courage to create. The shadow doesn't destroy your purpose, and it reveals it, but it asks a price, honesty, and it requires the death of who you thought you were. So if you're lost, stuck, or aimless, look at what you've been avoiding. That's where the gold is. Jung called this process the integration of the shadow, and it's not comfortable. But it's real. It breaks the illusion of the persona and allows the soul to speak. You begin to feel a different kind of purpose, not one that chases validation, but one that expresses truth. Not one that imitates others, but one that emerges from within. To find your purpose, you don't need to be more positive. You need to be more honest. And that honesty lives, always, in the shadow. There's a reason Carl Jung placed so much importance on the tension of opposites within the psyche. Inner conflict isn't a mistake or a flaw. It's the very engine of transformation. Most people believe they must eliminate inner contradictions to find peace. But Jung understood that wholeness isn't the absence of conflict. It's the conscious relationship with it. Inside each of us lives a constant dialogue between what we present to the world and what we bury, between what we think we should be and what we truly are. The friction between these polarities creates the heat needed for psychological growth. And that heat, uncomfortable as it is, can forge a new self. Inner conflict reveals where we are split. It exposes the places where we've betrayed our truth in order to be accepted, where we've abandoned our authenticity to survive. These moments of crisis, that's where our thoughts and actions are misaligned, where guilt clashes with desire, where shame shadows our longings, aren't failures. They are portals. Jung believed that only when the conscious mind is forced to confront what it has rejected can real change begin. Inner conflict is the invitation to stop running from yourself. It's the moment you stop being merely reactive and begin becoming reflective. But facing this conflict requires strength. The ego would rather avoid it by numbing out, blaming others, or pretending everything is fine. We project the conflict outward, imagining the enemy as our partner, our boss, or society, when in fact, it is the war within that cries out for attention. Jung wrote, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." This suffering, the pain of confronting one's inner division, must be faced consciously if we are to move beyond it. If you feel torn, lost, or fractured, it may not mean you're broken. It may mean your psyche is calling you to evolve. The real transformation comes when you stop seeing inner conflict as a curse and begin seeing it as a message. Something within you is ready to change. Something within you no longer wants to live. In contradiction, the shadow doesn't ask for destruction, it asks for dialogue. When we sit with the conflict, without rushing to fix or silence it, we open ourselves to a deeper integration. We become capable of holding paradox, strength and vulnerability, fear and courage, love and anger. And in doing so, we stop chasing a false idea of perfection and begin embodying something far more powerful, our full complex human self. Avoiding your shadow does not make it disappear, it only makes it more powerful. When we repress the darker parts of ourselves, we do not eliminate them. We simply hand them the steering wheel of our lives from the back seat. Jung warned that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The pain of this truth is undeniable. Every act of sabotage, every toxic relationship we can't seem to escape, every destructive habit we justify, these are often the shadow in disguise, expressing itself through unconscious repetition. The more we suppress, the more life forces us to confront what we're running from. Unchecked, the shadow can become a tyrant within. It shows up in unexpected rage, in emotional outbursts that feel disproportionate, in passive-aggressive behavior or the chronic inability to experience joy. We convince ourselves that the problem lies outside of us, in the unfair boss, the selfish partner, the cruel world, but these are often projections of an inner war we're too afraid to face. By refusing to look within, we sentence ourselves to a life of reacting instead of choosing, of surviving instead of evolving. The cost of avoiding the shadow is authenticity, and with it, purpose. Moreover, the shadow doesn't remain silent. It seeps into our decisions, influencing the people we attract, the careers we choose, the patterns we repeat. The more unconscious it becomes, the more power it holds. Jung believed that the unlived life, the potential we ignore, the talents we never explore, the parts of us we fear, lives within the shadow. By denying it, we reject the very essence of who we are meant to become. In other words, the shadow isn't just the place we hide our shame, it's where our soul waits patiently to be remembered. To not face your shadow is to live a life that isn't truly yours. It is to wear a mask so convincingly that you begin to believe it. But the psyche is wise. It will send dreams, synchronicities, crises, anything to get your attention. The longer we ignore these calls, the louder they become. Illness, addiction, depression, all may be signals of a shadow that's been exiled too long. But there is hope. The moment we begin to listen, truly listen, we step into a sacred process. The shadow is not here to destroy you. It's here to awaken you to your wholeness. To Jung, the goal of life is not perfection but wholeness. Individuation is the journey toward becoming a complete human being, not by chasing ideals, but by integrating all that we are, especially the parts we've cast into shadow. This process is not linear. It is a spiral, a repeated return to the unconscious, to forgotten memories, to fractured identities, with the intention of reintegrating them. Unlike self-improvement, which focuses on polishing the ego, individuation requires a radical honesty about our flaws, contradictions, and unconscious drives. It's not about becoming better. It's about becoming real. Individuation begins when we start asking dangerous questions. Who am I beneath all the roles I play? Why do I keep repeating the same mistakes? Why do I feel a longing I can't explain? These questions lead us inward, often into uncomfortable territory. The shadow, the persona, the anima, and animus, all archetypes emerge as guides and gatekeepers. To confront them is to reclaim the parts of ourselves we abandoned in order to belong. This is why individuation often feels like a breakdown before it becomes a breakthrough. The psyche dismantles what is false before revealing what is true. As we move through this inner process, we begin to develop a deeper connection to the self, Jung's term for the totality of our being, both conscious and unconscious. The ego no longer tries to dominate or suppress what it fears. Instead, it learns to collaborate with the deeper intelligence of the psyche. Dreams become messengers, synchronicities become signposts, and suffering becomes meaningful. What once felt like punishment begins to feel like initiation. Life stops being a battlefield of resistance and becomes a canvas for revelation. We are no longer at war with ourselves. We are in dialogue, Individuation does not promise a life without pain, but it offers something far more valuable, a life with depth, meaning, and inner alignment. To individuate is to stop pretending. It is to remove the armor, not for the sake of vulnerability alone, but to live in truth. It is the gradual awakening to a purpose that isn't given from the outside, but uncovered from within. In this process, we become our own authority, no longer ruled by inherited beliefs, cultural scripts, or unconscious wounds. We become whole not by being flawless, but by becoming conscious of every part we once tried to forget. We often think of our talents and gifts as purely positive, something to be celebrated, admired, and expanded. But Carl Jung invites us to ask a deeper question. What is the shadow side of my strength? What part of me has been inflated, perhaps, at the cost of something vital? Often, what society rewards in us becomes a mask, a prison of excellence. The charming become manipulative, the intelligent become detached, the responsible become controlling. Every light casts a shadow, and if we ignore it, the very qualities that make us feel powerful can quietly destroy our authenticity. Many of us were praised as children for certain traits: being helpful, being smart, being quiet, being strong. Over time, we began to identify with these traits, to build our sense of self around them. But what we call a gift may be a survival strategy, a form of adaptation born from emotional necessity. The gifted child is often a wounded child. Behind the perfectionism is fear. Behind the charm, anxiety. Behind the strength, isolation. The gift becomes a role we play to be safe, not a truth we live to be whole. And eventually we forget where the performance ends and the person begins. Jung warns of the danger of one-sidedness. When we over-identify with our strengths, we neglect the opposing energies that could keep us balanced. The overthinker loses access to intuition. The giver becomes blind to their own needs. The performer forgets how to rest. Our gifts, unchecked, become compulsions. What we once controlled begins to control us. The unconscious, always striving for balance, will sabotage us not out of cruelty but necessity. A breakdown, a burnout, a betrayal. These are not punishments. They are invitations to reclaim the parts of us we sacrifice to maintain the illusion of strength. To integrate the shadow side of your gifts is not to reject your talents, but to put them in service of the self, the deeper, wiser part of you that seeks wholeness, not applause. It means letting go of the need to always be the hero, the expert, the reliable one. It means giving yourself permission to be vulnerable, contradictory, and unfinished. Your greatest power is not in what makes you impressive, it's in what makes you real. And often it's the very parts of yourself you've hidden out of fear that hold the key to your deepest human potential. Carl Jung often referred to shadow work as a process of inner alchemy, not in the mystical sense of turning metals into gold, but in the deeply psychological sense of transforming raw, rejected parts of ourselves into integrated wholeness. The alchemist's fire is suffering. The vessel is the self. The lead is our unprocessed pain, shame, fear, and rage. And the gold? It's the awakening of consciousness. The moment we realize that what we've avoided is exactly what we need to reclaim. Shadow work is not about perfection or enlightenment. It's about becoming real. It's about holding tension between opposites until something new is born, something we could never have created by staying comfortable or safe. This is not a linear journey. True alchemy begins with what Jung called the nigredo, the blackening, the dark night of the soul. It's the moment when life breaks us open, when the old identity begins to die and there's no clear way forward. Many run from this phase, numbing it with distractions or pretending they've transcended it through false positivity. But those who stay, who dare to remain in the darkness, discover that the wound has wisdom. The chaos has intelligence. The breakdown is the birthplace of transformation. Only by descending into the shadow can we find the material we need to create something new. As we stay with the process, the albedo, the whitening, begins. clarity emerges. We start to separate what's true from what we were conditioned to believe. We begin to feel a quiet strength returning, not from domination or ego, but from deeper alignment with who we really are. The parts of us we feared, our anger, our grief, our vulnerability, now begin to feel like old friends we abandoned long ago. This is not about fixing ourselves, it's about reclaiming what we disowned. Jung taught that the shadow, once made conscious, becomes a source of renewal, even creativity. What once haunted us begins to serve us. Finally comes the rubedo, the reddening, the integration. We begin to live from wholeness. We don't become saints. We become human in the fullest sense. We stop needing to be only good, only right, only strong. We allow ourselves to be paradoxical, strong and soft, angry and loving, broken and beautiful. Shadow work as alchemy is the sacred art of becoming fully ourselves, not by denying darkness, but by bringing light to it. This is not a spiritual escape from reality. It is a deep descent into it. And the reward isn't perfection, it's presence. It's the ability to be with what is, without turning away. Living from wholeness means embracing the full spectrum of our humanity, including the flaws, contradictions, and dark corners we often reject. Carl Jung insisted that wholeness is not about achieving perfection or being without fault. Instead, it is the courageous act of accepting ourselves as we truly are, with all our brokenness and beauty intertwined. When we chase perfection, we deny parts of ourselves, creating fragmentation and internal conflict. But wholeness invites us to reconcile these parts, to become a harmonious, though imperfect, whole. This shift opens us to deeper peace and authenticity, liberating us from the exhausting pursuit of an idealized self. This path demands vulnerability. It asks us to stop hiding behind masks, the socially approved facades we adopt to gain approval or avoid judgment. Instead, we are called to show up as our authentic, messy selves. Living from wholeness means acknowledging our shadow, owning our mistakes, and loving ourselves through our darkest moments. It is an ongoing process, a daily choice to meet life with openness rather than resistance. Jung taught that when we embrace our entirety, we no longer need external validation because our sense of worth comes from within. This is the foundation for genuine self-acceptance and lasting psychological freedom. Choosing wholeness over perfection also transforms how we relate to others. We stop projecting our unmet needs or ideals onto relationships and instead connect from a place of true presence. This means we can love more deeply, with compassion for both ourselves and those around us. Our relationships become mirrors of integration rather than battlegrounds of conflict. Jung's vision of the self as a dynamic, evolving process encourages us to see life as an opportunity to grow into more complete expressions of who we are. Not flawless beings, but whole ones, richly human and fully alive. Ultimately, living from wholeness is a revolutionary act. It breaks the chains of judgment, shame, and self-rejection that culture often imposes. It invites us into a sacred dance with our true nature, imperfect, shadowed, radiant, and challenges us to become the fullest version of ourselves. This is not a destination but a lifelong journey, a continuous unfolding. Jung's teachings remind us that by embracing our whole self, we step into a deeper freedom. The freedom to live authentically, love fiercely, and face life's uncertainties with courage and grace. Carl Jung's profound insight teaches us that our shadow, the parts we often fear, deny, or reject, is not a curse, but a hidden treasure chest. Within those dark, unexamined parts of ourselves lies the wisdom and energy needed to uncover our true life purpose. The journey of shadow work is not easy. It calls for courage to face uncomfortable truths and embrace what society often labels as flaws. Yet this courageous confrontation is the gateway to profound transformation. When we accept our shadow, we unlock a deeper understanding of who we truly are beyond masks and illusions. This journey of self-discovery leads to wholeness, where all aspects of the self, light and dark, are integrated. It is through this integration that we find balance, creativity, and authentic power. By embracing the shadow, we no longer run from our fears or project them onto others. Instead, we reclaim our inner authority, allowing life to unfold in alignment with our deepest truths. Jung's vision invites us to see life's challenges not as obstacles, but as essential steps toward individuation. The process of becoming whole, unique, and fully alive. Living from wholeness transforms not just our relationship with ourselves, but also with the world around us. It frees us from the exhausting pursuit of perfection and external validation, inviting us instead to cultivate genuine self-acceptance and compassion. This shift ripples outward, enriching our connections and allowing us to live with greater presence and love. Jung's teachings remind us that the path to purpose is never about avoiding darkness, but rather learning to navigate it skillfully and bravely. In the end, your shadow is not your enemy, but your guide. When you stop fearing what lies within and start listening to its message, you embark on the most meaningful journey of all, the journey to your authentic self and your unique life purpose. Carl Jung's legacy is a call to awaken to this truth, to embrace the complexity of your being, and to live with courage, wisdom, and profound self-awareness. Your shadow holds the key. The choice to turn it into light is yours.